Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. My name is Douglas Gabriel and I'm your host today, and we're speaking again with Michael McKibben, the owner and leader of Leaders Technology, who invented social networking. We've had a few conversations with him before, and this time we're going to go a little bit deeper because we've outlined it for you, we've given you a framework, we've told you some of the information. You can go and research it at Americans for Innovation, you can research it on Aim for Truth, and every day Truth News Headlines is giving you information that also Michael McKibben is feeding to us. And what's amazing is the very criminals who are coming out in our age right now are the very criminals that he's faced off, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I get started, as usual, I want to read a little introduction so that it will be framed for those who may just be coming to this for the first time. When Michael McKibben and his software engineers created their quantum leap in technology to almost infinite scalability with their social networking invention, they planned to implement a moral system that respected personal property and privacy and envisioned truly a new age of information and freedom of information. While Leader Technology assumed that the government might want to use their invention, they had no way of knowing that the government intended to use it for the exact opposite purposes than they had created it for. They wanted it to take away the user's freedom and to surveil everything in the user's life, the exact opposite of what Michael's intent was with his invention. Leader Technology and Michael, they were trying to advance the industry and certainly would have never believed that his own government might become his enemy as he resisted the wholesale theft and weaponization of his invention. How could Leader Technology know that the most respected patent attorney in America was also the most corrupt? Who could have predicted that the NSA, CIA, FBI, and other intelligence agencies would come to control the internet, all the social networks, and every communication and broadcast in America, in total contradistinction to U.S. laws and civil liberties? To witness the twisted uses of Leader's original idea and invention must have been maddening for Michael and his crew and his shareholders. What was a beautiful idea when it was originally designed would become turned into the opposite instead of a higher tool for human consciousness development, because that's really what it was intended to do. However, thanks to our thieving government, it was turned into a dark web of pornography, gambling, haters, and total military surveillance. The internet that we once thought to be a harmless digital tool for greater communication became, in the end, the global network of control of industry, commerce, education, the military, and our personal lives. Most Americans changed drastically through interaction with social networks. And without the invention of scalability, it would not be possible. If you turned off the internet today, most Americans would think that that was worse than dropping a nuclear bomb on them. And that's not an exaggeration. So, Michael, what was it like in the beginning when you thought about the possibilities of what you and your team were creating? Did you have any idea that it would grow so big and fast and then be taken over and turned to the dark side?
Well, when you're trying to invent something, you obviously don't know what the impact could be until you get it finished, or you bring it along. No, I don't think we had any idea that it would have such wide impact. I mean, I would say it's probably not unreasonable to say this has had as much impact on society as the light bulb. No, we didn't think it would be that. We were just trying to solve communication problems. What we've observed is what you're saying, and it has been quite disappointing that society in general has been so willing to go down the rabbit holes that you're talking about without any discernment or thought, this might not be good for me. You know, I don't know what metaphor you want to use, but people have been willingly led down this path. It's pretty obvious to us now. But a lot of this stuff that we're concluding now has been the result of 15 years of study and hindsight and assessment of what's going on now. So we're only now beginning to see the big picture.
Well, it certainly was taken up wholesale by the whole world, and now people are addicted to it, particularly Facebook.
That wasn't my intent.
That's the whole point. When you did this and you finally saw what it was going to be, did you realize that the forces of light and dark actually hung in balance because of your invention?
I had no idea, no.
Can you see that now, and do you believe that's true?
I do believe it's true now. I mean, my past before I got into software development is I was actually the European director of a gospel music group that took music groups around the planet. And we were 20-somethings just trying to make the world a better place. And we were using music to do it. So we got to see a lot of the world, a lot of the different ways that people solve problems, interact. There are different cultures, and we had a special emphasis on the Iron Curtain. So we took groups into Poland and Yugoslavia and Hungary and Romania and the mother bear, Russia. And in the process, we met a lot of wonderful people.
And you probably found that now, with this idea of calling Russia our enemy, that's pretty silly, seeing that we've actually never been an enemy with them. They've been on our side during World War I, World War II. We've actually had no conflicts with Russia. Now we hear this ridiculous nonsense of all the Russian collusion, the Russians' connection. I don't even know that Russia is our enemy to begin with. And you went into Russia in a time when people weren't even allowed. You have even told me that you worked with top Russian mathematicians to create some of the things that you've actually got patents on.
I've worked with a lot of very talented intellectual people in the Soviet Union from Brezhnev forward. We were doing it to promote Christianity and belief and faith and honesty and the virtues. And we were working with many. It's hard to tell the story.
Yes, because some of your friends died there. It's a very, very, very sad story, and that you were so brave. And in a way, your courage is an earmark of everything that you do. The courage that you've had to solve problems, to move forward, to say, the Russians aren't our enemy. Christianity connects all of us. The conversation between Oliver Stone and Putin when he was in the Kremlin and he was in that beautiful, beautiful chapel, my wife and I were remarking, oh my goodness, what would happen if American presidents actually had to do their business inside of beautiful, beautiful, unbelievably gorgeous
I actually
Christian
was
chapels.
in that building, participated in the third ever church procession allowed in that building since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1917, or the beginning of the Soviet Union in 1917, and actually saw the old Soviet leaders participate in this church procession in the streets of Moscow, across the Red Square, with the Cross of Christ.
I've seen these films, so I know that what you're saying is true. I've seen the ministry work that literally led to nations becoming free from the Iron Curtain because song was what led them in this. Even the pictures of, there you are standing next to Boris Yeltsin. I mean, this is an amazing story. You seem to be right at the crux of huge leaps and developments in consciousness, and yet you're just a humble guy, and you really don't take much credit for being really the brilliant genius that you are. And I can also see that your Christian connections and your connections to Russia make you an extraordinary person, very unusual American, and in no way could anybody say that what you have done had any collusion or connections to the Russians in any sense. I mean, Uri Milner stole your idea, took it back to the Russians, and made mail.
Well, the communists were godless. Let's be clear.
Yes,
they were godless. We were just the opposite. We were trying to bring belief and faith to that culture, and we were just musicians singing music. And what we encountered was a lot of citizens in that country who wanted the same thing. So we said, if you're willing to take the risk to have us in, we're willing to take the risk to come in. And it's just unbelievable, the doors that open.
It truly is. As I watch your films and see your history with this amazing thing that you did with these music groups and going into not only Russia, but also to Poland and to many other
Hungary, Romania, yes.
and received by the top officials, received by the top religious officials also in those countries. So what you did was a revolution, and then I see it that the revolution that you created with social networking, you got introduced to what people would call, some of the worst behavior on the earth. The communist, mafia, oligarch, I'll just murder you if you get in my way kind of thing. Vladimir Putin, we can say all the nice things we want about him, but when it comes down to it, he's the godfather. He's the godfather of Russia. This is a mafia. They only allow people to have the wealth who they want to have the wealth.
Well, one of the disturbing things about the discussion of Russia is the culture in Russia is not monolithic, and people don't all think the same. They're like everybody else. They get up in the morning, they eat, they go to work, and so you can't make these generalizations about Russia that the media is getting away with right now, because they know, most Americans know nothing about that culture, when in fact it's a very complex culture.
Well, I think that your experience with our own patent office, with James Chandler, with this group of tech cartel, evil manipulators who have become billionaires on the backs of inventors, I think that the behavior that you've seen in America could be compared to what we consider to be the evil behavior of Russia. Matter of fact, I'm not so sure that they're any different. I would say and characterize the patent office, now that I've researched it, as nothing more than a mafia.
Well, yeah. The term I use is brutish. Our culture, our government culture, has become brutish, like the old Soviet system was in the way they treated their people, and so the pattern's there. And so the danger is, if America doesn't wake up, we will end up there. And I started working in the Soviet Union during the Brezhnev era and during the beginnings of the fall of communism. So I watched that culture, their system collapse. At the same time, I saw unbelievable courage and heroism from the citizens. So I know both are possible.
Wow.
They're possible here too.
Well, you have, with James Chandler, faced evil directly. His actions are as vile as anything I can think of. He is a lawyer who has his entire intent is to break the law, to create laws, to protect himself, to protect his friends, for cronyism, for theft. So you have said before that you didn't realize that these were evil people. When it all came down to it, after you have faced off so many evil judges, so many evil lawyers, and the evil intent which has cost you 7 lawsuits, $10 million in legal fees, your investment of $20 million for your initial invention. How is it that you rectify that? When did you realize who they were and who you were dealing with?
It's a continuing revelation. Hindsight's 2020 now, and again, it's been the research of the last 15 years, and so as the pieces were coming together, the revelations of these people just slowly came out. Nothing was like magical overnight. With Professor Chandler, he was a unique situation because he was a very charming guy, and preached the Constitution when he was talking to me, the entrepreneur, and now I know was doing exactly the opposite, which is, as we know, pure Saul Alinsky tactic. But the people that he introduced us to, the law firm Fenwick and West in California. I mean, it's just uncanny that he introduced us at the same time as Fenwick is beginning to engage with Facebook, and Fenwick is Facebook's largest patent attorney now. So there was definitely a backdoor plan for this whole thing, and they planned on carrying this throughout their lives. It's obvious.
And it seems like they get patted on the back, they get rewarded, and they get raised up in their positions. For instance, you have said that the work of the Anonymous Patriots brought to your attention the Highlands Forum. Well, when you look at the Highlands Forum, a guy named Andrew Marshall runs it. He's 90-some years old now, and when you look at him, he looks like the sweetest old man that you'd ever want to see on the face of the earth. They call him Yoda, and what they do is he had worked for the office of in the Navy. He had worked for the Office of Net Assessment. What that means is he analyzed, if we go to war, who wins and what you gain from it. And so he is basically the chief warlord strategist for America, but not just for America, because Highland Forums serves international interests. So you look at Andrew Marshall and you say, that is a man who's held in greatest of esteem by all of the entire Defense Department, all the military, all the intelligence. They hold him in esteem.
These guys have all convinced themselves that they're on the side of righteousness. It's uncanny. But I remember when we first met Professor Chandler, he said his mission in life, he said he turned down a position on the Supreme Court, and that because his mission in life was to protect the intellectual property of the United States. Wow. Now that impressed me as a inventor. Well, how can I go wrong having this guy as my patent attorney? So they have very convoluted logic that convinces them that they're on the side of right, and that if you don't buy into it, you're the guy that's got the problem.
That's right, because Andrew Marshall is hailed as a hero because he looks at these inventions and then he decides whether they will be created. And the answer is always yes, because if a weapon can be created, then the United States needs to create it and control it. So therefore, they justify what they do with absolute righteous feelings that they are helping America. They're not helping America at all. Highland Forum, whatever they decide, first off, they're secret meetings. You only get invited by him and now the man who runs it, O'Neill, Dick O'Neill. But this group, Highlands Forum, no notes, nothing can be written down. The agenda is simply, here are our intents of what we need as new weapons. Here's what we have as patents we can steal. Here's what we have as ideas coming out of DARPA, In-Q-Tel. Here are the private corporations that are going to fund us. Now, what do we do with this? Let me give you one example. Right now, Russia says they have 5 weapons that they can defeat us with, and we have none of those weapons. Why do they have those 5 weapons? Because Hillary Clinton, with her reset button, set up the tech city outside of Moscow, and Raytheon started building weapons there. So they built supersonic missiles. Supposedly we don't have those supersonic missiles, and that just made them ahead of us. What will that do here in America? Raytheon didn't just get the contracts for Russia; they're now going to get fantastic
So that was that
contracts.
Sokolov city that Cisco put $1 billion into, isn't it?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
They were doing Raytheon missiles out of that group?
Oh yes, there are 3 military industrial corporations, top defense contractors, who went over and built factories there so that they could build technology beyond ours. So that came out of course, supersonic missiles came out of Highland Forum because they sit and they discuss these things. And then if Russia gets going on it or China gets going on it, then America has to build them. And so then they make money from both sides of the fence. They love to create war, which is created by the Council of Foreign Relations. And Henry Kissinger and Andrew Marshall are the 2 people that Bannon met with when he left the White House. First 2 people. Why? Because Henry Kissinger created nuclear war and created nuclear deterrence and created almost all of our policies for foreign relations coming out of the Council on Foreign Relations. But it was Andrew Marshall who then had to apply that, create the weapons that could then support the political ideas that came out of the CFR.
Imagine what you could do if all that creativity was redirected toward actually improving the human lot and making real peace.
That's where I'm going with this. And that's what you were trying to do. From the beginning, you had the best of moral intent.
Right.
You were going to create a revolution, basically, in free information.
I've seen I mean, if you've studied the history of Estonia, the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they had something called the Singing Revolution, where they actually locked arms during up and down the road that connected all 3 countries, and they actually came out there and started singing. And when I was over there in 2013, they said that our presence there 10 years earlier was a big inspiration to them, where they actually saw Gorbachev decide to leave the Baltics because these people got together and they sang.
You're telling me
That's the
Ronald
kind of-
Reagan didn't take down the wall? You're
That's
telling
the
me
kind
that
of revolution we
millions
need.
of people holding hand to hand across an entire border of 3 countries basically said to Russia, we want our freedom? And you were the person who was actually there, and you might have even been, we won't go too far, but you certainly were one of the seminal influences that started that movement.
Some folks, when we were over there in 2013, said that was true. So I take great pride in that.
Well, that makes you a completely different person than Mark Zuckerberg or Peter Thiel or any of these people who are now out there trying to represent that they are young, brilliant geniuses going to Harvard, and then I invented something so big I didn't have to get my degree. That's Mark Zuckerberg. He was failing. He wouldn't have got his degree anyway, is what I've heard. So we have these representatives. Oh, young people inventing high-tech things which are completely immoral, completely aligned with the government ill intent. That's what they took your invention and turned it into, the most vile misrepresentation.
That's the problem with technology. Technology is all unseen. So for the average person who's using it, they don't see anything about how it works. And I think that's how people have gotten away with all this stuff. And so people are naturally forgiving and understanding. And so if somebody tells them a lie, they don't initially assume it's a lie. And so I think that what we're seeing now is the natural end product of the lies. The lies are catching up to them now. And we see it across the board. And thankfully that's true, that good people can finally see that these people have deceived them, and that these people happen to be running our government and they happen to be running the internet. And we better do something about it before we can't do anything about it.
And many laws have been passed for them to continue doing this.
Right.
So is there a way to upset their apple cart? Is there something that can be done, changing the patent office, changing something in government that would actually put some morality back into technology?
Well, I think at a strategic level, I've thought about that a lot. At the technical level, yeah, it's just engineering. It can be fixed. But at the strategic level, I've come up with my own little thoughts about what needs to be done. I think one is we need to have term limits, not only on politicians, but also on embedded bureaucrats. Because it's the embedded bureaucrats that we've discovered are really running our government, and it's a lot of these people that you've mentioned with the Highland Forum. And then the other thing is, we've got a problem with these massive international law firms. They're basically city-states unto themselves. I think we need to have some sort of Glass-Steagall type breakup of these massive international law firms. Maybe make them so they can't have a law firm that goes outside of a state, for example. And then the other thing is, I think, with the disciplinary councils for lawyers, because it's so easy for a lawyer to get ensconced in these things and then start to play games with the rules and regulations. And what if in a disciplinary council in a state, which is where all the discipline occurs, you had a majority of lay people in the decision-making processes about the ethics of lawyers? Right now, it's all done by judges and lawyers. So what if lay people, common people, were on a rotating basis the ones that made decisions about whether lawyers were ethical? I think you might see a whole different type of person go into law. Maybe somebody we can trust. Because right now it's really difficult to look at the legal profession and not recognize that over half of Congress is lawyers, and you know, lawyers from Harvard pretty much run this whole cabal, with some from Stanford and some from Yale. So we've got a real problem in that we've got an overabundance of one profession running our government, and that can't be good. I mean, it's not logical that it's good. We need engineers. We need people who know how to fix things. We need people like Donald Trump that know how to get work done and move on. They're not in it to make money for themselves for the rest of their lives and the rest of their children's lives. So I think there are some things that can be done that could be very strategic in fixing our republic.
Those are great ideas, wonderful ideas. I just wish that the morality would arise in Americans to start to scream out and to shout that this has to be done, because
Right.
the things you just mentioned, they can be done. They're not impossible to do, and they can upset their apple cart. And at that point, we can have America back, and the bureaucratic corporate takeover of America that's been going on for 100 years I believe is beginning to turn in the direction that it should be. And what you said here today is a beautiful plan and a beautiful idea on how that can be done.
But plurality requires accountability, and when the accountability system breaks down, then you don't have plurality and you don't have a republic. We've got to get back to that dynamic, and I think we can.
I think you're so right, and we just appreciate the fact that you're here to talk with us and lead us through what it is that you've gone through and you've suffered, and your moral concept, your moral idea that created this invention that could still become a moral factor in our society instead of one that is used for military weaponized purposes. So your suffering, it's profound. 17 years of going through this, looking evil in the face. All we can do is salute you for what you've done and tell you how we're going to stand behind you and we're going to keep supporting this
Thank
until
you, and God bless you.
we can turn this ship in the opposite direction. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.